everybody, and welcome back to Both Sides Book Club. You are with Catie and Debbie, and we are on episode number 6. In this episode, we are talking about the book Dear Edward by Ann Napolitano, and I really hope you loved it because I did.
I loved it.
Surprise, surprise. For those of you that haven't read the book, or you would like a little jogging of your memory, the book is about a boy called Eddie or Edward, and it starts off with him and his family boarding a plane with 191 others from New Jersey going to LA. Unfortunately, during the flight, there is a huge crash and the plane lands in Colorado. Absolutely everybody dies in the crash except for Edward. So the story starts there, and then it quickly jumps to Edward waking up in hospital, and we go into his life of the after. The story was actually inspired by a real plane crash.
Yeah, I know.
That happened
In 2010.
in 2010, where there was a flight from South Africa to London, where a 9-year-old boy was the only survivor, called Reuben.
Yeah.
And the author actually got completely addicted and absorbed with this story and was the catalyst to writing Dear Edward. The reason I chose this book is I actually had heard a lot about this book, with the readers really enjoying the fact that even though it is such a devastating story, weirdly enough, when you're reading it, feels really light.
It's sad, but it's not sad.
Yeah,
somehow.
yeah. And I think, Anne does a really, really good job of making really serious and horrible incidences really graceful and understated, which, is an interesting way of writing. So I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Well, the author took 8 years to write this book. As you say, she became fixated with this case that was popping up on the internet. And I guess in 2010 we were in the early days.
It was the start of social media.
Of social media. And she just, could not get it out of her head, and knew ultimately that she wanted to write about it. I guess to imagine an ending for the real life Reuben, like what
comes after,
what potentially could have come after for him.
Yeah.
So I loved it. I think the 8 years in the writing shows, because the lightness of touch, I think that Anne puts into what could be completely ghoulish, and blatant and just horrible, isn't.
It's very delicate.
It's just
very,
very, very delicate, and you're with Edward every single step of the way. Your heart skips a beat. I think with every chapter.
I think the interesting thing that she does, and we've seen a similar style of writing in some of our previous books, but the way that the whole book is set between the 2 hours and up to the final seconds of the crash.
Yeah.
And then it jumps to Eddie or Edward in modern day trying to overcome what's just happened. Did you enjoy the jumping?
I really liked it. I think it separates the book really well, in terms of that all of the suspense and the action builds in the narrative when it's on, when you're on the plane, and you know that this plane is going to crash. So every single time you go into another chapter about the plane, you go, well, is it going to happen now? Is it going to happen now? What and what caused the plane to crash? So you have that building of tension,
suspense,
right the way through, and then you have the Edward chapters, which are more the psychological chapters, the looking at and the trying to imagine what can come after such a catastrophic loss. So I think the two build themselves well. And also I think if the book was split down the middle and you had everything leading up to the crash and then everything after the crash, I think you're in danger of forgetting everything that led up to the after. But this way, the tension is still there, and it keeps it in your mind.
I think I completely agree, because in a way it's cruel, because you start to get to know these characters and then you keep revisiting their final moments.
Yeah.
And you know that they're all going to die, which in a way is really cruel as a reader, because you have to keep revisiting knowing that they're going to die. But I think that was done so intentionally, because you're right, it makes you carry the loss, which is, it makes you think, this is what Edward's living through. He is carrying this every day. It's completely not something that just gets wiped in your memory. It's every single day he's carrying this burden of losing his family, and I think and the people he came in contact with on the plane.
Because I think that's the whole point, isn't it? It's not, even though this is Edward's story, it's not just Edward's family that were lost. Every single passenger on board had family, just as they did in the real plane crash. And although we only see a handful of the passengers, we then meet their family subsequently. So that just kind of double reinforces. What did you think about the various characters that we did get to know on board the plane?
I think this novel was cool, because when you go on an airplane, you're mixed with a whole bunch of random people.
Do you talk to people on the plane? You travel a lot. Do you actually talk to people on the plane?
Okay, well,
sorry.
Wait, hold on. I'll answer that in a second. But going back, I think it's cool in this book, because being on a plane or a public transport or any sort of, public transport, is that you do have this just like cluster of mixed people. And generally, like, unless you're traveling, I don't know if you remember when I was little, we always used to play games of like guessing what Mum and I don't know, you guys probably maybe not did the same thing, but when we were out at cafes or sitting on airplanes, a way that we would entertain ourselves is making up backstories for
Making up backstories for everybody.
For these people. So sorry in advance if we've made a backstory about you. But reading this book, it reminded me of that, and I think often when you're traveling on a plane, especially if you're there for work, you're just in and out. You are often exhausted. You don't really want to talk to people. You're switching off. You want to put your headphones on, your mask on, and just like zone out. But it reminded me of every single person on this plane is a human. They've got stories, and I caught myself thinking, gosh, there's so many times that I've gotten on an airplane or any public transport, or just come in contact with people where I haven't given them the time of day when they've really wanted to speak to me. But I've been so self-absorbed in my own, like, okay, I've got, whether it's a short trip, I've got 45 minutes to punch out this email, or I've got, 16 hours to watch my movies and whatever.
I'm the worst.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm absolutely dreadful. It's kind of like I've got my book.
Yeah.
I've got my movies that I want to watch. I've got my headphones.
It's like annoying, right? But no, it is. It's annoying. Like, I know, I caught myself, you sit next to somebody and you've got this really, really chatty person and you're going, gosh, like, you're really lovely, but I really don't feel like talking to you.
Yeah.
But this book made me go,
do you know what?
I probably need to be a better human being, because not saying that all planes are going to crash out of the sky and that's going to be your final moment, but I feel like you do, everybody has a journey, everyone has a story, and you never know. Like, it's one of those questions of you never know what's going to happen, so you might as well be a really, really good person and actually make time to make connections, because that actually, at the end of the day, is the most important thing to our souls.
I mean, there are lots of people I know that have actually made really good friends with people that they've sat next to on a plane. In fact, someone was telling me not long ago how they'd met their husband just completely and utterly randomly, because they were on the same flight. So it was kind of like, note to self.
because it was set on a plane, it's really cool because I think it gives the writer a lot of freedom in that you can make up whatever characters you want because it is such an eclectic bunch of humans that sit on an airplane.
Yeah, that's true. And there's no sort of necessary direct connection between any of them.
And in a way, I found it really interesting because on the airplane, you come in contact with so many people in the story. Like there's so many people's journeys that you're remembering. But then when you go into the after, it's simple. It's stripped back, and it's really just, I mean, his relationship with his aunt and uncle, but also primarily his relationship with Shea. What did you think about Shea and Edward's relationship? Did you think that it was always going to happen they would fall in love? Spoiler alert.
Yeah, probably, but I don't feel that it was. I don't feel that it was cliched at all. I think that Shea was exactly what Edward needed. I mean, he's like, I think that the loss that Edward felt most keenly was of his brother Jordan, because they had such a, I mean, not to say that he didn't miss his parents, but he had such a special bond with his brother, and Shea was another child, so it needed somebody that he could actually connect with in a different way than a 12-year-old, a bereaved, traumatized 12-year-old boy would interact with any kind of adult. And Shea just seemed to totally get him, didn't she? I mean, she was sort of, slightly...
She was like the right mixture of quirkiness, but then also honest.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's exactly what he needed. He just needed somebody to be brutally honest with him.
Yeah, I mean, what was it she said? You're the only.
Oh yeah,
you're the miracle boy.
Nobody can hurt you, or like nobody can hurt you anymore.
You've lost anything.
Yeah, everything.
Or that you're this one in a 10 million person who survived a plane crash. You're never going to be normal.
Yeah.
And I think he did kind of need that. She didn't pussyfoot him around him, but by the same token, she was there when he needed her.
Like she understood that he needed to sleep in her room. Like it wasn't weird. It was just so innocent and honest, which I think is exactly what he needed. I think probably particularly in a world where lots of people are trying to protect him, it was probably really refreshing for him to have a really okay, this is how it is.
Yeah, but I think the other side of the coin, if you flip it, is that Shea had needs too.
Yeah.
Because she didn't feel that her mother particularly understood her, and she didn't have a lot of friends at school, and she was slightly strange or unusual. She wasn't a normal girl in kind of that respect. So Edward was the yin to her yang. They fitted together really, really well. I think it would have been a shame in a way if they had actually not fallen in love.
Yeah. Although I felt like their relationship was so innocent, and so it was such a strong friendship that I actually wouldn't have been disappointed if they didn't fall in love.
Yeah.
I don't know, I guess when his brother's girlfriend came on the scene, I sort of anticipated that maybe
they would have hooked up.
Or just something. And the way that Shea dealt with that, she was she already suspected. She's like, did you want to kiss her? And what?
Yeah.
And it was just a really nice friendship to read, because I was like, I didn't have the expectation that they would be boyfriend, girlfriend, or fall in love. It was what it was, right. I think, which I really liked. There was that brutal honesty in their friendship, which is nice. So it was kind of like a little sweet ending that they get together. But I didn't have the expectation that they would. Yeah,
I mean, I suspected that they would, but as I say, it seemed fine. I'm certainly not going to say that it shouldn't have happened, or that was too obvious. I actually think it was kind of a nice touch to it. Yeah. I think actually I just want to go back to the passengers actually, because something's just struck me about the other passengers on the plane. And then their links to the afterwards. Edward kind of forms an attachment or almost an obsession with the soldier on the plane. I guess because he's actually the only one that Edward really can remember, because he had
the conversation at the bathroom line
while he was waiting to go to the loo. So how important do you think that was for Edward, that he felt some sort of connection to somebody else that had been on the plane?
I just want to say, like, in a weird way, I think it would be very overwhelming feeling the responsibility of carrying everyone's journeys. But almost to Edward, it was kind of important in his healing that it wasn't just him that was going through it. It was bigger than him.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of think, like, particularly with the soldier, that, you know, he was young, he was fit, he'd served his country, and he was obviously a really, really nice guy that Edward enjoyed talking to. That maybe almost kind of like retrospectively, he became a bit of a role model when Edward started lifting weights at school. Is that you know, that maybe the young soldier was became almost like an iconic figure for Edward, and also again because of the loss of Jordan, that Jordan would never grow up to resemble this iconic young fit guy. That I think that maybe, you know, that was at play there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't really see that, but now that you're saying that, I can see it.
Yeah.
I think at the time I didn't really pick that up, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think the other interesting thing that this book plays with is the fact that it was inspired by a true event. Well, that was the catalyst to writing the story anyway. Yeah. And part of that was the fact that the social media was really taking off. And certainly in this book, you can see how he becomes this famous
public property.
What did you think about intertwining that in through the story?
I think it's a really interesting question, because we're all fascinated, aren't we, by tragedy happening to someone else, and the rise of the internet and of social media means that everybody's got an opinion. It's not like it used to be in the past, where there were just official media outlets with quotes from the police or from a doctor. Or from a representative of the family giving an official version of what happened. These days, anybody can stake a claim. Anybody can comment. And whilst that's good for us to be able to consume the story, I can't even begin to imagine what it's like to suddenly become the focus of that kind of attention when you're dealing with such an incredibly difficult tragedy, circumstances, you know, not to be able to have news crews outside of your house 24/7, to have people staring at you across the street, to have thousands of people writing to you, that must just make recovery so much more difficult. I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
I mean, definitely, for sure. It would just be in your face so much. But I think it's, I think the thing that interests me the most is the fact that his uncle tried to hide him from it.
Shield him, yeah.
Or shield him from it, or protect him from the exposure. But Shea was like enabling him to see it at whilst she was kind of controlling and like giving him bit by bit, are you comfortable with seeing me saying it? So I think we're in a day and age where social media, it is there.
Yeah.
And I wonder how harmful it is to protect to the extent that her uncle did. His uncle did, because, you know, Edward kind of says that. He's like, why didn't you just tell me? Why didn't you just talk to me about it? I think, I don't know, I feel like the trickle of seeing how much people cared and how exposed he was, without sounding blunt, I almost just think you're better off ripping the Band-Aid off straight away.
Well, I kind of agree, but I also don't agree, because I think the timing is critical.
Yeah, but I feel like Shea kind of helped guide him through it, whereas his uncle completely kept it away from him. But in a way, all of that is also part of his loss and a burden he eventually needs to wear and carry.
You're right, and I think it is. I think, you know, maybe Shea was in a position to judge when Edward was ready. More so than his uncle was. And I think that that's a very natural thing, isn't it? As adults, you know, we do want to protect and shield our children. And Edward, you know, Lacey and John became Edward's parents. They had no experience. I think that they do what all parents do, is they do the best they can, and that they only, I don't think there's, you know, any shadow of a doubt that they only had Edward's
for sure. No, I'm not suggesting that
interests at heart, and in fact it did actually all unfold. So, you know, maybe in a way it was better for Edward to feel as though he had control through Shea of the exposure that he was getting, rather than you know, his aunt and uncle just going, well, here you go. There's 15,000 letters. So
that's what I'm saying. I feel like that's kind of what I'm saying. Like I don't disagree. I don't think that the uncle and aunt didn't have his best intentions. Like 100% he did. They were trying to protect him and, you know, help him go through his process. But I think it's just one of those unfortunate things with social media, is it's just there, it exists, people are brutal, and it's that question of, do you rip the Band-Aid off slowly, or do you
and maybe there is no right answer. Maybe there is no right answer. We've talked about Shea, but did you like Edward?
I did. Edward, he's so thoughtful. Like, even though he's going through so much, you don't see him overreacting or like even, you know, there was obviously marital issues between his aunt and uncle, and he just addressed it so maturely, like in a way that was really sympathetic, and he'd really considered how potentially the two could be feeling and stuff, and even simple things with the principal and the plants and his ferns. Like, he really he seems so much more, what's the word, not mature, but more he's just so sensitive, but in a really,
or intuitive
in a really thoughtful and compassionate way. So I really, really liked him, because you couldn't help but just like love him and how thoughtful he is, and just go like, you've been through so much, and yet you're still thinking of the interests of, like, the best interests of other people. Like, the fact that he wants to write back all the letters, and the way that he's thinking about how to manage the money that he gets given, and all these things. You just go, wow, like, for someone, instead of going into his own shell and going, no, I'm not, don't talk to me, whatever. He's still always thinking of other people.
And his decision ultimately that he wanted to be a teacher.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he wouldn't have to have worked ever.
Yeah, exactly.
If he could have chosen to have become a celebrity.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and live the rest of his life off the back of the money, the compensation that he received, and the money that people sent. But no, he wanted to give the money away and help people anonymously, and then to become a teacher, to actually give something back
After everything.
I think that that's kind of
one of the life lessons, isn't it?
And I think that for me that was actually what I loved so much about the book, because it's a book about a plane crash, but it's also not about the plane crash. It's about how do you come back from something so catastrophic happening. I mean, I guess it's a little bit like we talked about with Sophie Hardcastle in our last episode. It's how do you go forwards? How do you make something positive and meaningful with your life, with your future after tragedy? What do you think?
I think it definitely, but I think the other thing that comes into play, and the reason that I really, really did enjoy this book, and the reason that I understand why people had such great opinions of it, is that, you know, it is about the overcoming of disaster, but I think also essentially it is a book about kind people.
Yeah.
And how to be a kind person, you know, how to nurture and care for other people, whether or not they're immediately close to you or just random strangers, because you never really know. It's that question of like, you never really know what's going to happen. So
yeah, I mean, Edward had a lot of people helping him, and a lot of people being kind to him in the end, didn't he? You know, we've talked about his uncle and his school principal and Shea.
But likewise, he was equally as kind.
Yeah.
You know, and I think for that reason, I was really sad when I finished Dear Edward, because I wanted to be in his world, even though it was such a sad world. It was still such a hopeful and
very much so,
kind and generous world.
I felt great when I finished reading it.
Yeah.
I have to say, it just gave me such a warm glow.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
So thank you, Anne, for
So
writing
thank
that.
you, Anne, for writing it. We loved it.
We loved it, and we hope you enjoyed it too.
Yeah, we hope that everybody at home enjoyed it too. If you haven't read it, I would encourage you all to read it. It's such a lovely book. So thank you everybody for reading along with us so far. We really hope you enjoyed the first pick for June. And our second pick for June is, drumroll, boom, 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 boom,
The Dictionary of Lost Words by Pip Williams.
woohoo!
So, this one's a little bit different from the kind of things we've picked before. It's historical. Pip is an Australian author, and it's set in Oxford at the end of the 19th century and into the early part of the 20th century.
Okay.
It's about books and words and the making of the very, very first Oxford English dictionary.
Oh, cool.
Set against a background of the emancipation of women and women's suffrage. So it should make for a really interesting read.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. I'm excited to read it.
Good.
Well, everybody, thank you for listening to our episode number 6. We hope you enjoy the next book, and we'll see you soon.
Happy reading. We hope you enjoyed watching this episode.
If you did, please leave us a comment below. We'll see you soon.